My name is Alina, and I'm sitting here on my Ford 2003 7.3 Powerstroke Diesel Shorty school bus that I'm gonna be converting into a tiny home. And I'm making this video here today as somebody without any prior building knowledge, intended for the audience of people like myself who have no building knowledge and don't even have the vocabulary of tools like ratcheting wrench, hex bit, driver. So if you also are thinking about building out a school bus but you don't know anything about building, you can do it. You can do it. The internet has it all. I'm right there with you, and I'm here to tell you what I figured out. I'm going to talk to you guys today about how I got the seats out and the floor out and the wheelchair tracks out, which I know are 3 different things, and you might be here for just one of those 3 things. So I'll put timestamps below so that you can just go to whatever you need from this. My perspective on this is going to be one of very detailed things. Like, there's people out there who know a lot about building and schoolie conversions. Chuck Cassidy, he's my guy. That's how I'm learning how to do everything. But because so many of these amazing schoolie converter people are so advanced at building, they don't necessarily go into as much detail as I need somebody who does not have that building experience. So I am here to get into the nitty-gritty with you for those of you who are starting really from ground zero. Because I bought a lot of things and I tried a lot of things that I didn't need, and I did a lot of research. I really did. I tried to figure this out before I got started, but still, you know, that's how it goes. So hopefully you can learn from my mistakes, and hopefully there's something of value to you here. And if there is, there's going to be more content, so be sure to like and subscribe. I appreciate that. All right, so the first thing, as you're taking out the seats, a lot of people have videos of this, so I unfortunately did not take any videos of me taking the seats out, but if that's what you want to see, they are out there. Pretty much what you're going to see is 2 people, one person on top and one person on bottom, unscrewing the bolts, and they both have wrenches. One person on top is holding the bolt in place, preventing it from spinning, while the person underneath unscrews the nut, because if you just have one person, you're just going to spin the bolt in place. That's why you need 2 people. Or you could do it the other way. I don't know if it really matters, the unscrewing, if you're doing that from the top or bottom. But before you even do that, the first thing you're going to want to do is get yourself some PB Blaster. I have a 2003 school bus, like I said, so it's got a lot of rust. It's from Pennsylvania. That means that some of the nuts were really stuck in place. So I thought WD-40, right? People tell you WD-40 is how you unscrew things, but no. I went to the store and they told me PB Blaster. That's what you're gonna want for this, I guess. Again, it's what somebody else told me. But we should have done that overnight and put it on all of the bolts. That's just going to loosen it up for you to make it easier to unscrew, because it is a whole lot of elbow grease to get all these bolts off. So you're going to start with that. Then comes the wrenches. When I thought of a wrench, I was thinking, you know, this is a wrench. This is where I'm at, guys, okay? This is what I was thinking for wrenches. But really what you want is a ratcheting wrench. So another way that a wrench could look is like this. So this is does not have a ratchet. You just put your little bit on the end and you just turn it just like you would with this, essentially. But this is gonna have, you know, one of these pieces that you stick on, and this is the same as what this would do. Obviously a smaller version. So that's not what you want either. All right. The third thing that you actually do want is a ratcheting wrench. So this has like a little switch here, so you can go from tightening to loosening. So you want to make sure that that's correct. And you just get your little bits on here. But another way that I went wrong from this process was getting short little sockets like this. So sockets can also be very long. And this is actually what we wanted, because the bolts underneath are super long. So this would not reach, you know, the nut that's up here that we need to unscrew. So this one is long enough that it was able to actually grab the nut and unscrew it. Pretty much the sizes that we needed were 13, 14, and 15 millimeters. Those were the main sizes that we used for our little wrench situations. And then the other thing is the length of the handle. So because, again, PA bus 2003, very rusty, super stuck, some of these things were really hard to get out. So the person on top holding things in place, we ended up getting one of these like mega wrenches, because the longer the handle is, the more torque that you have and the easier it is to unscrew things. So this does not ratchet, so this would only work for the person on top who was holding things in place. So that just made it a little bit easier, because the other thing that we did was use a drill. So I was very excited to find out about this. Maybe you guys all knew about this, but I did not. This is a little bit that, this goes into your driver. This is the little piece that you could put onto a drill or driver. And then this other piece is just like those wrenches I was talking about, where you can just slide one of these guys on. And then all of a sudden, instead of using your hands, you can go ahead and use your drill or driver to unscrew your bolts, which was a game changer. I would recommend using your driver if you're going to do this, because the driver has more power, and that was what was necessary for us to get these off because they were stuck on really hard. And once we had this bad boy going, it was actually pretty quick to get the bolts off. In most of the videos that I've seen of people taking out Skoolie chairs, I feel like I never see people talk about this, so take that for what it's worth. But because drivers are really powerful, that was another reason it was good to have this extra big boy on top, to make sure that we weren't using more strength than was necessary. Because it can be tiring. It can be very tiring. And along those same lines, it is really important to make sure you're turning the right direction, because your girl sometimes would accidentally tighten things instead of loosen them, which made a bolt that might have come off pretty quickly really, really hard to get off. So, gotta make sure righty tighty, lefty loosey, Another thing, so like I said, this drill situation was great, game changer. But sometimes when the bolts would be really, really stuck, we would need to use a wrench first to loosen up the initial break. But then once we got the nut going a tiny bit with a wrench, then we would go on with the drill to do the rest, because this is going to be a lot more powerful than your driver. So if you have really stuck one, then you're going to want to use a wrench. There are going to be some bolts that are impossible to unscrew like this, because they're going to be rusted into place too hard, or maybe they're going to be in a spot that's impossible to get to under the bus. So for those bolts, we found it the most effective to cut the tops off with an angle grinder. And I'm not really sure if it's better to use a grinding disc or a cutting disc, because we were cutting the tops off, but if you're maybe newer at this, it might be better to do a grinding disc, because it's a little bit safer probably in case you're not able to get under the top, but you might be accidentally getting more of the top part of the head of the bolt instead of underneath the head of the bolt. Probably doesn't make too much of a difference really though. I think we probably used both at different points. And that might have been faster, honestly, for some of the bolts that were really, really stuck. It might have been faster to just cut them off instead of using all of the elbow grease. But the thing about the angle grinder, of course, is that it's super loud and there's sparks everywhere and it's just metal maybe flying towards your face. So it's kind of nice to not have to use it if you don't have to. But then, strength or intense noise and vibration and scary spark type thing, whatever floats your boat, I guess. The last thing I'll say about getting the seats out is that each of the bolts had one of these big washers that was securing everything in place. And so, there's like probably a few hundred of these. And under the bus, there's a whole rust coating to prevent rust from happening when you're driving along and whatnot. So I think at some point I'm gonna go under the bus with some kind of rust proofing paint and like redo that so that I can extend the longevity of my bus and to prevent rust as much as I can, because that is the #1 enemy of schoolie life, water and rust. So that'll be a little bit, you know, tedious, but important. Once you have your seats out, I have a short bus, right? So the next thing to do was the wheelchair tracks. But before we could get to the wheelchair tracks, we had to take the floor out because the wheelchair tracks are sort of flush with the ground. And then the subfloor was like underneath or at the same level of that. So to get the floor out, that was pretty straightforward. You know, there's like a black mat, and there's probably a lot of videos of people doing this out there too. I unfortunately don't have any videos of that part. There's basically this black covering on top of the plywood that is between the metal and the floor you stand on. Some people take all the black mat off, but you don't actually need to. It's nice to take off just insofar as you'll be able to see where the different pieces of plywood come together, which is good because you're going to have to find the edges of those pieces of plywood in order to pry them up. Take that or leave it. And the way that we got the plywood out was with a crowbar. This was 100% of the tools that I used to get the floor out. And I think probably initially I would use this end to kind of like get a little bit of leverage up, and then I would go with this guy and kind of like stick it in under the plywood, and then I would hammer the this end into it, and then pry this up with this lever arm here in order to get even more space in here, and just kind of continue like that. So there were some screws that were holding the plywood in place, but we couldn't always get them out, so there were some that we just unscrewed with a drill and it was fine, but some of them were just like really old or rusted or stripped or whatever, and they just like would not come out. But it's not really necessary to unscrew all those screws. It probably makes it a little bit easier, but ultimately you can just use force because wood breaks and you can just like tear the wood out over the screw and it's fine. And then we just came through and cut the tops off of the screws with an angle grinder. So then we got the floor out from where the seats were, and we moved to the wheelchair track side of the bus, which is where I'm sitting now. And for this side, we started out using the same method that we did over there, which, you know, would make sense. You got a nut and a bolt and you unscrew the nut and the bolt comes out. That would make sense, right? Wrong. The bolts on the chair side of things look like this, where there's this nice little hexagon that's easy to grip onto with your, you know, whatever situation. On the wheelchair track side, the bolts had to be flush with the ground, so they couldn't stick up like this. So basically, there were hex bits that you needed to stick in. So, like, think L bracket. This is how we started out. So the top of the bolts we would stick this into, and the person on top is going to hold that in place while the person underneath uses either a wrench or the driver to unscrew the nut. We started out actually, I think, with this one of these guys, which is an even shorter lever arm than this one. And you can even see that this got stripped. That did not go well for us. That's not the way. But I did not know that these exist. So I'm gonna get closer to show you this. It's basically the same thing that exists for the wrenches. So this is the square thing that goes on top of your wrench, but on this end is a little hexagon. That made it so that we could take our big boy and hold things in place like this. So that was definitely an improvement from our original little L guy. But still, we were doing like 6 of these bolts a day. Like, we would spend hours. It was not fast. It was slow. It was difficult and slow. That was not a good method. So eventually, and there were so many bolts too. There's so many more bolts on the wheelchair side than there are on the chair side, and we were stuck on this for a while. We did not know what to do. So, you know, I saw a lot of videos of people cutting them off, but that seemed really hard. And I found a video of somebody who'd used a Sawzall or a reciprocating saw. So I learned how to use one of those, and that did not work very well for me. It was actually not that fast, and it literally will like shake your whole body into the next dimension. It was just incredibly uncomfortable, and like probably would cause me nerve damage, I think, if I did it the whole time. Oh, and I forgot. We tried 2 other methods before that. So one of these guys, this is a nut splitter. So, great name, right? The nut splitter, we love to hear it. So this guy works, this basically screws and unscrews. So you put your little bolt over here, and then this is gonna screw up until it gets to the point. Well, obviously you would do this on the nut, but I don't have the nut. But essentially, you know, here it is, meeting the top here. And if you just keep screwing this, allegedly, hypothetically, the claim is that this would cut the nut, split it, so that way you could just take your bolt out. That'd be great, right? Maybe that works. Maybe that can be a thing for some people who are skilled in using this tool. I am not, and it didn't work at all for me. What would happen is basically when you screw it in, it would slip off. So like you get really, really, really close, and then it just moves to the side. Like it just could not actually grip hard enough. So maybe if you already had kind of like a groove in there that this could stick into, maybe that would work. And we even tried too, you know, using like our handy dandy driver with our, you know, one of these guys to imagine that this is actually big enough to fit on here to drive this in really fast, but yeah, that just did not work. Didn't work. I don't know. I did watch people using that tool and successfully who really liked it, but maybe I just got a too cheap of one, or it's not sharp enough. But yeah, this was just, it's really trash. It was trash. Waste of money. So another thing that we tried was using an air hammer, because I got an air hammer because that's what I saw online to be the best way to take out rivets when you're taking down the ceiling and walls. That also turned out to not be true. Didn't need an air hammer. A titanium drill bit was way easier and faster than an air hammer for that process. But anyway, we had an air hammer, so we thought, you know, basically same idea, get the bolt and the nut and try to air hammer the nut until it's split and then remove the bolt. Sounds like a great idea. Seems like it should totally work. Did not. Maybe it could. It never worked. We didn't ever get it to work. We made some progress, like hacking away at a nut, but it took a really long time and it never came completely off. And it's really loud. You have to sit under the bus to do it. And so it also would not have worked for the majority, not the majority, for many of the bolts, because you just wouldn't be able to fit an air hammer up underneath the bus like that. So that didn't work either. Ultimately, what did work was an angle grinder. That was the easiest thing. And once we figured out how to do that, it was actually amazing. So we would just pry the wheelchair track up, get a chisel underneath of it to hold it in place, and then use the angle grinder to cut the bolts from the top. So that was great because you could sit on top. It was way faster and just did not take nearly as much physical effort, and also would work for getting places that if you were trying to sit under the bus you couldn't reach. Just way easier overall and way faster. And it took us like 2 weeks to do the first like 20% less than that of bolts up here because we couldn't figure out a good method, and then it took 2 days to do the rest of them. It was so good, so fast, and I think I do actually have a video of that, so be sure to put that in here. And what a relief that was. And then you just had to pry out the plywood in between the wheelchair tracks. So you would take a track out and then you would pull the wood out in between the two tracks and then just keep doing that.
The one downside to the angle grinder was that on some of these holes you can see there are cut marks, so I accidentally cut into the floor. But there's already so many holes in the floor, I don't think it's causing any structural issue. I think it'll probably be just fine.
So the last thing that I'll say about this, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a meditation teacher. I was thinking about my body a lot, and especially when we were pulling the floor out, since I was just using a crowbar, it's really important to save your back. So you want to make sure that whenever you're like prying something out of the ground, you keep a nice arch in your back. You don't want to be like, because that's gonna hurt you. So you want to make sure you have enough little arch that your back stays straight, that your shoulders are engaged, that you're really trying to take the bulk of the effort into your legs and not your back, which there's probably a lot of videos out there too that you should watch because you do want to save your body. I'm already experiencing issues with my wrists and hands from all the angle grinding because I guess all the vibrations over a sustained period of time can cause nerve damage, which I'm hoping that I don't actually have nerve damage. I'm hoping it's just like, oh, you spent too long angle grinding today. My dad worked in construction his whole life and has so many problems with his body from all of that work. It's like crazy the way that we just expect men to sacrifice their bodies in order to construct things, which I know you gotta construct things, but like you can also totally try to be ergonomic with your body and your health and take breaks. So take care of yourselves. Take care of yourselves out there. It's gonna be a lot on your body, and your body is number one most important thing. Don't sacrifice it for anything because it's the only one you got forever. And if you're gonna enjoy schoolie life, you're gonna need to feel good in your body. So, oh, if you like my earrings, they are for sale. I'm a jeweler too, so I'll put a link in my bio to the jewelry that I make if you're into that. I also make art. I also do meditations, so you can look through my channel for my meditations. That's mostly what the channel is right now. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something out of this. Again, feel free to like and subscribe if you did like the video and you think other people might too. It would help me to reach more people. And again, yeah, I just really want to help the people out there like me who really are just starting from zero, who just did not even know the difference between this wrench and this wrench. And I had to do a lot of research about all of these tools because I don't even have the language like sockets and bits and, you know, ratcheting and not ratcheting, like all these vocabulary words and tools. It's like a whole language that you have to learn. And like I said, a lot of these bus guys are amazing at what they do. But, you know, they're speaking to people who have a baseline building practice, probably. But I didn't, which is fine. You can totally figure everything out. You could totally figure it out. And this is what I figured out. And hopefully it'll help you not make the same mistakes that I did. So wishing you peace and health, everybody.